Is the glass ceiling breakable? Is it not a glass ceiling? Is it a metal ceiling?
I think that it feels like a metal ceiling, but the fact that we're nominating female candidates is at least a move in the right direction.
Young women in America have seen 2 female presidential candidates lose to Donald Trump during some of the most formative years of their lives. Are these defeats burning out hope of one day seeing a woman in the Oval Office, or fueling a fire for the future? We find out on Politics IRL.
Thank you all for joining us on Politics IRL. Let's start with some introductions. Tell me your name, what you do, and the political party you associate yourself with. Let's start with Leondina and work our way around.
My name's Leondina. I am a first-year student at Cape Cod Community College. I go there under the Mastery Connect program, and I am an independent.
Hi everyone, I'm Jacqueline Corvo. I am a graduate of Simmons College. I'm currently employed in the private sector, and I'm also an elected member of Republican State Committee here in Massachusetts.
I'm Ella Gardner. I'm a first-year student at Hobart William Smith Colleges in upstate New York. I'm the Vice President of Communications for the Young Democrats of Massachusetts, and I'm a Democrat.
Hi everyone, I'm Jada Pierre. I'm from Boston, specifically Roxbury. I'm a senior at Harvard. I study government and computer science, and I identify as a progressive Democrat.
So we've seen both Hillary Clinton and Harris lose to Donald Trump in presidential elections. How have these losses impacted your views of female leadership and women in office? Jada, we'll start with you.
I personally have a little trouble viewing both of their campaigns on equal footing, and specifically because, at least with Kamala Harris, I'm thinking more so about how her campaign deliberately avoided identity-based messaging. At least from what I engaged with online, a lot of it wasn't centered around her being Black or South Asian, but rather how we can't go back to Trumpism. And compare that to Hillary Clinton's campaign, where she is the first woman to win a major party's nomination, and she made gender the central theme of her campaign. And that's evident in her slogan, the "I'm with her," because that's signaling to women and allies the importance of electing a woman into office. And I bring this up to say that she chose to tap into that and lean into that, whereas Kamala Harris didn't. That was something that was projected onto her. And for me, this has some sort of like implication specifically, where it's like, what does that signal to women of color, particularly Black women who want to run for office in the future? I believe that candidates of color, specifically women of color, Black women, should be given the agency of whether they want to lean into that or not.
Jacqueline, what do you think?
So I want to speak to the way her race was addressed, because I 100% agree with you that as a biracial person, some people see me as white, some people see me as Asian, and having your race constantly questioned is confusing when you're younger, and very, I think, as we get into adulthood, it becomes very classless. So I agree with you that having your race projected and being told what you are or you aren't is completely unnecessary. Having said that, I think we need to think about how Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris came into their nominations, right? So I think Hillary came up through a much more democratic process. Kamala Harris was anointed.
Leondina, I know you were also kind of disappointed, to Jacqueline's point, about how Kamala Harris came up.
I feel like how the Democrats handled the nomination very much tarnished Harris, because I was considering Biden. I did not like Trump. Originally, I was looking into Nikki Haley because I wanted someone that was moderate in the middle. I don't vote based on gender, although people assume because I'm a woman, automatically I'm going to vote for Harris or I'm going to vote for Clinton. I did vote for both of them. But she was, in my opinion, a prince being handed the crown from the king. She was not democratically pulled into the candidacy. She was just given it, and I really didn't like that. I was disappointed because I want to see a woman on merit win a candidacy, win a race. I don't want to see them just shoehorned in to candidacies. I don't want to see them just as a token almost. I feel like sometimes both parties prop up women to say, see, I have a woman on my side, just to pander to the other party's voters, and I don't really like that. I think that it should be based on what the voters want. I'm a woman, but I'm not a token. I'm voting based on policy. I'm not voting based on gender.
Seen a lot of head nods to what Leondina's saying about being tokenized. Ella, I know you were pretty, deeply involved or committed to Harris's candidacy. Seeing her lose, how has that impacted your views of seeing women in office or female leadership in the future?
Yeah, I think I was in 5th grade when Hillary Clinton ran and lost. I'm now a first year in college when Kamala Harris ran and lost. Two, in my opinion, excellent female candidates. Both had their flaws, but they were qualified. They had experience under their belt. I think a lot of people felt seen through much of their policy, and I think the additional layer, at least that I felt as a young woman, is that I could see myself in the representation. And I think, Leondina, you were talking about, policy and gender. I think those are, inherently connected to each other. Because for me, I think a lot of women craft policy based off of their own experiences as a woman. The way that I view the world is through the scope of my experiences as a woman, whether it's combating, microaggressions and, sexism even in certain areas. The way that I think and, believe that certain things should be done is seen through that lens. So I kind of think those are inherently connected. But after both Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris have now lost to the same man, who, in my view, is, just a raging misogynist who can say whatever he wants and get away with it, and nobody seems to care, especially, I think there are women out there who have sons who, if they said something that, the president now would say, that would be appalling, and there's no kind of, pushback from that. So I guess myself, I wonder, as someone who has been involved since I was 14 years old, who has put in the advocacy, the organizing work, and is looking toward, a future in elected office, in politics, is the glass ceiling breakable? Is it not a glass ceiling? Is it a metal ceiling that no one's going to be able to get up and out? And I think that's not just a Democratic problem, that's also a Republican problem.
Ella, I'd actually like to add that, to your point, I think that it feels like a metal ceiling, but the fact that we're nominating female candidates is at least a move in the right direction, and the fact that Nikki Haley at least was polling before Trump, I think it was good that she at least tried to run, because it was admirable to see women in office actually trying to reach for the presidency and getting closer and closer each time. And also you mentioned that policies are based on your life experience, the scope of your life, like your gender or your ethnicity or your race, things like that. I guess I'm an idealist because preferably for me, politics would be based on the ground up, on what the common people need.
Yeah, are we making progress, do you feel, with Ella and Leondina's points of breaking the glass ceiling? Are you guys, after this election, feeling defeated or disappointed, or more motivated now for the future? Jacqueline and Jada, if you want to weigh in.
Sure, I'll just go back to not being able to really pick apart how I feel about how Kamala Harris came into her nomination. So I think that it's very difficult to understand how voters responded to her in the presidential election if you don't take into account how voters responded to her in the presidential primary, right? So I'm just going to go back to how in the world could the Democrats pick a nominee who came in last if they knew there was a possibility that they had to replace Joe Biden? The voters had already spoken. She was one of the first individuals out of the presidential primary. And it just made no sense to me to put her in a VP slot that could potentially become a forced nomination. There were just a lot of stumbles, and I think it makes it a really bad case study for moving forward and how to evaluate female candidates.
Jada, what do you think?
My opinion on this is, I don't want to say that Kamala Harris or Hillary Clinton lost because they are women. I just don't think that's true. I was in 8th grade when Hillary Clinton lost her election, and now I'm a senior in college. So I'll speak more about the recent election when I say this. I don't think she lost because she was a woman. I think that the Democratic Party lost touch with the working class. I do think that they have achievements, but I don't believe that they're communicating that in the best way. And I'll reference social media, for example. A lot of young adults, people around my age, are on TikTok, right? You look through Trump's TikTok. Even though I don't like him as a candidate, I at least could say I knew where he stood on X, Y, Z. I could say that. But when I look at Kamala HQ, for example, it felt like they were disconnected from the dire state of the campaign. And again, if I'm an undecided voter and I'm not keeping up with these different news outlets, how do you think I would vote? And I'll say this, if I were in that hypothetical situation, and if I were that American, I may have even voted for Trump. It's about learning how, I think that the party needs to do a better job at communicating their accomplishments in a way that it would be digestible and receivable.
So Jada just said that she thinks that the reason Harris lost was not because she was a woman. Does anyone disagree with that?
I think it's both. I think there are two aspects. We have a messaging problem as Democrats, and that kicked us in the butt this election. And I think it's going to kick us in the butt until we figure out how to fix it. I think Democratic policies, when I listen to individuals that, blue collar, middle class workers in states like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, when I listen to them and they say, these are my concerns, prices are too high, housing is too much, I feel like, we're not doing enough to protect our citizens at home, et cetera, et cetera. Democrats, in my opinion, have the policies that tackle all of that. Maybe not in an instant, maybe not as quickly as people would like to see it or in the way that people would like to see it, but it tackles those problems. And I think Republicans don't, at least not Trump. On the front of the gender issue, I think inherently that is a factor in why Kamala Harris was not elected. I think it was gender and I think it was race. Not the only factors, not just the two factors, but they were factors. I think America still has a problem when it comes to recognizing that women in political spaces are able to move up, in any space for that matter. It's not just in politics. But I think we need to have real conversations about how are we supporting women and how are we, putting aside the gender issue and saying, what's the merit, what's the policy? And if a woman has better policy, which I think was the case in this election, why didn't she win?
I'd like to follow up on that. I acknowledge that she did experience sexism, and honestly, I'd say misogynoir. And if you don't know the intersection of racism and sexism, I just don't feel confident being able to say that was a huge part of it. Because again, the lack of communication within the Democratic Party allowed Trump to dominate the narrative when it came to jobs, economic concerns, manufacturing, and all these different aspects that Americans care about. And that didn't allow them the Democratic Party, they weren't resonating with the frustrations and concerns of the everyday American. So I just feel as if I can't measure it, and I just don't feel comfortable being able to say this played a huge role. But I do think it played a role, but from my observations, it's just they're out of touch.
If I can really quickly add on to that, I think I agree with you. I think the primary factor was a communication and a messaging issue. My thing is that a lot of the news coverage was dominated by Trump saying stuff about Kamala Harris's race and her gender. What if that wasn't the case? What if a lot of the news coverage wasn't dominated on that and it was a policy conversation? Would it look different? Would the election outcome have been different?
And I'm sorry.
You go.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
So Alexi, one thing I wanted to go back to is this theme of messaging, right? So if you guys probably won't remember firsthand, but Alexi, Clinton's quote, it's the economy, stupid.
Yes.
I mean, that was the Democratic Party of the 90s, and they've really lost their way in terms of their messaging. The price of bread matters, the price of gas matters. Being able to, maybe take the family on a vacation affects your quality of life. If you're not able to afford the basics and maybe a couple of small luxuries along the way as a middle-class American, it gets really difficult to say that you're living a happy life. And I think one thing that the Republicans do well is, and I credit Ronna McDaniel with this a lot, who's one of my idols, she really understood the power of messaging and understanding what mattered to middle-class Americans, and she made sure that that was the message that got out there over her chairmanship, and Trump picked right up on it, and the Democrats unfortunately fell into this, I think, what do they call it, virtue signaling? I think they really fell back on that a lot, and that was a shame, and I think they really let down a lot of women in that period of time.
Yeah. Harris did a lot of good things as vice president, but at the same time, she's still that career politician. There's a factor in America right now where we're judging people based off of colleges and education, and there's this anti-intellectualism and anti-elitism. And Harris and Clinton were both viewed as elitists, and they were judging them based on their education and things like that. And I just got sick of this whole thing with that. And it's just, I want to see the common person represented. And a lot of people in America don't have a college education currently. Trump appeals more to the middle class and people like that because he speaks in layman's terms and he seems like a guy that's just walking down the street. He has this cult of personality where even though he was a privileged billionaire that grew up in a life of privilege, he was able to appeal to the more common folk, and he's getting that response. And that's one of the things I didn't like about Harris. I didn't like how she presented herself to the middle class. Why I call Harris pandering is because I am very pro Second Amendment. I believe in the Second Amendment. That's another one of that's my constitutional right. And it's my right as an American citizen. And when she said, yes, I own a gun, and was talking about it, she didn't know the make, model, anything. She didn't give out any information on it, and to me that
She did say that she has shot her gun and knows how to shoot it. I do want to put that out there, so go ahead.
Yes, but we didn't really see any proof. It would have been better for me if I saw her going to a sporting club or going to a gun shop and shooting with someone, or just talking to them about, why the Second Amendment matters to them.
Okay.
If I could respond to two sort of main themes that you said, Landina. One on the kind of, layman's terms that you put about both of them. I think for Kamala Harris, it was a double-edged sword. And I think that's because if she spoke intellectually as she did, a lot of people didn't really understand what she was talking about. Because you're right, that's not what most people listen to in a conversation and really pick out. Unless you're really engaged in the political dialogue every single day. I mean, I'll admit that I am. You're not going to be able to pick out certain phrases and understand the intricacies of, crafting policy and, such and such. That's just not how the vast majority of Americans engage with politics. But I think on the other end, if she had put things in quote unquote layman's terms in a kind of a similar way that Trump did, of it was engaging with, people not in basic terms, I guess is the best way that I could say that. I think she would be branded as stupid. And I really think it was, you lose either way. I think that also ties back to the gender question of women are held to a higher standard than men are. And I think she and her campaign recognized that in needing to engage and, lay out intricate policies early on. I mean, people were hampering her. Where is Kamala Harris's economic policy? How is she going to differ from Biden? And in the end, she did. Their campaign put out intricate, bullet-pointed economic policy with this is what I want to do and here's how I'm going to accomplish it. President Trump never did that. There was no cohesive, you went on his website, his campaign website, and you had issues and it redirected you to the Republican platform. And that was it. There was no, individual plan like Kamala Harris had. So I think for that regard, it was kind of a double-edged sword for her. Yeah.
I want to make sure we want to get time for closing thoughts. We're running low on time.
Sure, yeah.
My closing thought, I want everyone to hear from everybody, is what level of hope do you have that in your lifetime we will see a female president, and who would you like it to be? Jacqueline.
It's a really tough question. There's a lot of great conservative women out there. I'm a huge fan of Kelly Ayotte, who was just elected governor of New Hampshire. I certainly hope she goes far and considers it. I'm a big Nikki Haley fan, and she's young, so I'd like to see her come up again. Those are probably my top two.
Yeah, Nikki Haley, I feel like we might have more in store for her possibly.
Fingers
I've heard Leondina mention her, and now you as well. So Leondina, what do you think? What's your hopes for a female president in the future, and who should it be?
I think that we just have to keep pushing forward, even if it's inch by inch, centimeter by centimeter, millimeter by millimeter, in the right direction. I think that seeing 2 women now within 10 years being nominated for the Democratic position means that I think that the Republicans are going to start considering women candidates better. And I would like to see Nikki Haley. I just think, you know, it seems like an uphill battle, but if we just keep climbing little by little by little, I think eventually we're gonna get there, and I am very hopeful that it's Nikki Haley.
Excellent. All right, 2 Nikki Haley fans. Jada.
I think we will have a woman president somewhere in the future. Not sure when, but I think anything's possible. And for me, I'd love to see Ayanna Pressley be in that position. You know, she has a great history working with communities, specifically mine, an underserved community.
Roxbury.
Exactly, Roxbury. So I'm hopeful, and I'd love to see her in the presidential role.
All right, so somebody local.
There's a Madeleine Albright quote that the president of my college, Mark Duran, says all the time, and of course it's escaping me right now, but it's about optimism and pessimism. And I'm kind of in the middle. I don't know where we go from here, truthfully, but I'm with Jada and I'm with, you know, everyone sitting around here. I think someday, but I don't know that someday is good enough for me. I think of the governors, the great Democratic female governors that, you know, are dotted across the country everywhere. Our very own Maura Healey. I'd love to see Maura Healey run for president. Gretchen Whitmer. Gretchen Whitmer is a name that's floated around often. Laura Kelly of Kansas. I think there are so many good Democratic women out there who really could embody Democrats' values and also, you know, re-engage us with the middle class, the working class, and really do good for America. Yeah.
Well, this has certainly been a great conversation. Thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you.